Billionaire's son throws coffee on black waitress. What happens next will change his life forever. What if a billionaire's son, who has never faced a consequence in his life, threw coffee on a black waitress in a fit of rage? Cole Grayson, 28, was the embodiment of privilege. Born into the Grayson dynasty, a name synonymous with skyscrapers, tech giants, and political influence, he lived a life where the word no was a foreign concept. His days were a blur of private clubs, yacht parties, and penthouse suites overlooking the city's glittering skyline. At La Belle Époque, his favorite upscale café, the staff knew to reserve his window table, serve his espresso with a twist of lemon, and never interrupt his phone calls. Cole didn't see the people around him as individuals. They were extensions of his world, existing to make his life seamless. He wasn't malicious by nature. He didn't plot to demean anyone. But to Cole, the world was a hierarchy, and he sat at its peak. Waiters, drivers, baristas, they were replaceable, their struggles irrelevant. Kindness was a formality, a tip slipped into a jar or a curt nod to a doorman. Anything deeper felt like an unnecessary complication in a life already perfectly curated. Tasha Williams, 24, moved through La Belle Époque with a quiet grace that belied her exhaustion. Her dark curls were tucked into a neat bun, her uniform pressed despite the 12-hour shifts she pulled between this job and a diner across town. Tasha's life was a balancing act, supporting her mother, who was battling chronic illness, and her younger brother, Jamal, who dreamed of college but faced a future of financial uncertainty. Every tip she earned was a step toward keeping her family afloat, a reminder of the weight she carried. That morning, the café was packed, the air thick with the aroma of fresh coffee and the chatter of wealthy patrons. Tasha weaved through the tables, her tray heavy with drinks. As she approached Cole's table, a distracted customer bumped into her. The tray tilted, and a cup of coffee splashed across Cole's pristine white shirt, staining the fabric like ink on paper. The café went silent. Cole's head snapped up, his blue eyes blazing. He stood, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted, his voice echoing. "Do you have any idea how much this shirt costs? It's worth more than you make in a month." Tasha's heart raced, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the sting. "It was an accident. Let me get you." "An accident?" Cole's laugh was sharp, cutting. In a flash of rage, he grabbed his own coffee cup and threw the contents at Tasha. The hot liquid hit her chest, soaking her uniform and burning her skin. Gasps rippled through the café. A woman dropped her fork. A man half stood, unsure whether to intervene. Tasha froze, her hands trembling as coffee dripped onto the floor, pooling at her feet. For a moment, their eyes locked. Cole's were alight with fury, his jaw tight. Tasha's held a storm of emotions, hurt, humiliation, but also a quiet resilience. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. Instead, she reached for a napkin, wiped her hands, and offered a small, pained smile. "I'll get you a new coffee," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole scoffed, tossing a wad of bills onto the table before storming out, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. The café erupted into whispers as Tasha turned back to her work, her jaw clenched, her heart pounding. She couldn't afford to break down. Not here, not now. But as she cleaned the mess, she felt the weight of every stare, the sting of the coffee on her skin, and the deeper wound of being reduced to nothing in front of a room full of strangers. Cole didn't think about Tasha as he left the café. He didn't think about her as he changed into a fresh shirt in his penthouse or as he sipped cocktails with friends at a rooftop bar that evening. But when he lay in bed that night, her face crept into his mind. Those eyes, that smile, the way she hadn't flinched. It wasn't guilt, not yet. It was something else, something foreign. A nagging discomfort, like a pebble in his shoe. The next morning, Cole returned to La Belle Époque. He told himself it was habit, but a part of him wanted to see Tasha's reaction. Would she grovel? Snap. Instead, she served him with the same quiet professionalism, her eyes avoiding his. No anger, no apology, just a calm efficiency that unsettled him more than any outburst would have. He left a larger tip than usual, but it felt hollow, like trying to buy forgiveness he hadn't earned. Over the next few days, the incident clung to him. He started noticing things he'd never seen before: the exhaustion in the barista's eyes as she handed him his coffee, the way the doorman at his building stood for hours without complaint. He wondered about Tasha. Who was she? Why had she stayed so calm? The questions gnawed at him, pulling him out of his carefully constructed bubble. Restless, Cole wandered into a neighborhood he'd never visited, a working-class area with cracked sidewalks, bodegas, and community posters plastered on lampposts. He found himself at a community center, drawn by the sound of voices spilling out into the evening air. Inside, a group discussed local issues: underfunded schools, evictions, systemic barriers for people of color. Cole lingered in the back, invisible in his tailored coat. For the first time, he heard stories that didn't align with his world. Stories of families stretched thin, of dreams deferred by circumstance, of resilience forged in struggle. He learned Tasha's name from a coworker at the cafe and found her on social media. Her posts were sparse but revealing: a photo of her with her brother, Jamal, at a park, captioned, "Keeping him smiling." Another mentioned her father, who'd passed away years ago. "He taught me to keep my head high, no matter what." Cole's chest tightened. He thought of his own father, Richard Grayson, a man who spoke of their wealth as a testament to his own brilliance, never mentioning the countless hands that had built it. The discomfort grew into something heavier: guilt, maybe even shame. Cole had never questioned his privilege before, but now it felt like a weight, a debt he'd never acknowledged. He didn't know how to fix it, but he knew he had to try. Cole's life had been defined by ease, but this was different. The incident with Tasha had cracked something open inside him, and he couldn't ignore it. An apology wasn't enough. It felt too small, too self-serving. He needed to do something real, something that mattered beyond his own comfort. He decided to start a scholarship fund for underprivileged students, focusing on those from marginalized communities. It wasn't just about Tasha, it was about all the people he'd overlooked his entire life. He hired a team to design the program, but the plans felt sterile, detached from the realities of the people they were meant to help. Cole realized he needed someone who understood those realities firsthand. He returned to La Belle Époque, his usual confidence replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. When Tasha approached his table, he stood, his hands fidgeting. "Tasha, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low but steady. "What I did was wrong, unacceptable. I'm trying to make it right, not just for you, but for others. I'm starting a scholarship fund, and I'd like your help to make sure it actually makes a difference." Tasha's eyes narrowed, her arms crossing. She'd heard promises like this before, gestures from wealthy people who wanted to feel good without doing the real work. "Why me?" she asked, her tone sharp. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." "Because you do," Cole said. "You know what it's like to fight for everything. I've never had to. I need someone who can make sure this isn't just another rich guy's vanity project." Tasha didn't respond immediately. She agreed to meet with him later, but her skepticism was palpable. She'd learned not to trust people like Cole, people whose wealth shielded them from consequences, whose apologies often came with strings attached. Over the next few weeks, Cole and Tasha met regularly to shape the scholarship fund. Tasha was cautious, but her insights were invaluable. She spoke of students who couldn't afford application fees, of families who saw college as a pipe dream, of communities where systemic barriers were as real as the air they breathed. Cole listened, his world expanding with every word. For the first time, he saw the city not as a playground, but as a tapestry of struggles and triumphs he'd never noticed. But then came the twist that changed everything. One evening, as they reviewed applications at the community center, Tasha froze, her eyes fixed on a document. It was an old employment record, a name tied to the Grayson family. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "My father worked for your family, Cole. He was a janitor at Grayson Towers for 20 years. He worked himself to the bone, and your family paid him pennies. He died with nothing, no savings, no security. Just a body worn out from serving people like you." Cole's stomach churned. He'd never known. His father had always painted their wealth as a product of ingenuity, but now the truth began to surface. Tasha's father and countless others had been the backbone of the Grayson empire. Underpaid, undervalued, erased from the narrative. Tasha's pain wasn't just about the coffee incident, it was about a legacy of exploitation, a wound that ran generations deep. The revelation shattered Tasha's fragile trust. Working with Cole had been hard enough, but now it felt personal. Every dollar he spent on the scholarship fund was tied to her father's labor, her family's sacrifices. She wanted to walk away, to protect herself from the pain of reliving that history. But a part of her, the part that had kept her head high through years of struggle, urged her to stay, to make sure the fund honored people like her father. Cole couldn't let it end like this. He went to his father, Richard, in the Grayson family's opulent study, its walls lined with books and awards that screamed success. "Tell me about the workers," Cole demanded, his voice shaking. "The ones who built this family. Like Tasha's father." Richard's face hardened, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "It was a different time," he said, his tone defensive. "We did what we had to do to succeed. Everyone cut corners." "That's not an excuse," Cole shot back. "They deserved better. We owe them." The confrontation was raw, painful. Richard admitted the truth. The Grayson empire had been built on the backs of workers like Tasha's father, people who'd been paid the bare minimum, their contributions buried under the sheen of wealth. For the first time, Cole saw his father not as a titan but as a man complicit in a system that valued profit over people. It was a turning point, one that pushed Cole to act. He dove into his family's history, uncovering stories of displaced communities, underpaid workers, and deals that prioritized wealth over fairness. He expanded his efforts beyond the scholarship fund, using his resources to fund community programs, support small businesses, and create opportunities for those who'd been marginalized. He met with community leaders, listened to their needs, and committed to long-term change. Not as a savior, but as someone trying to right a wrong. Tasha watched Cole's efforts from a distance, her heart torn. She saw the community center receive new funding, the small businesses he helped stay afloat, the students whose lives were changed by the scholarship fund. Slowly, her resentment began to soften, not because she forgave the Grayson family, but because she saw Cole trying to be different. He wasn't perfect, and she didn't expect him to be. But he was showing up, listening, learning. She continued working on the scholarship fund, guiding it with her perspective. Every meeting was a reminder of her father's struggles, but it was also a chance to honor his memory. She pushed Cole to include mentorship programs, to address not just financial barriers but the emotional and social ones that students like her brother faced. And Cole listened, his privilege no longer a shield but a tool he was learning to wield responsibly. One evening, as they sorted through applications, Tasha shared a story she'd never told anyone. "When I was a kid, my dad used to come home exhausted, but he'd still sit with me and Jamal, helping us with homework. He'd say, 'You keep going, no matter what. The world won't make it easy, but you're stronger than it.' I'm doing this for him." Cole nodded, his throat tight. "I'm trying to do this for him too," he said quietly. "And for you." Tasha didn't respond, but something shifted. She saw the man behind the privilege, the one who was grappling with his own flaws, trying to build something better. A year later, the scholarship fund had transformed lives. Students who'd never dreamed of college were now enrolled, supported by grants and mentorship programs. The community center buzzed with new programs, after-school tutoring, job training, small business grants. Cole had become a fixture there, not as a benefactor but as a partner, learning as much as he gave. Tasha had changed too. She'd enrolled in night classes, pursuing a degree in social work to help others like her family. Her brother, Jamal, was a freshman at college, his tuition covered by the scholarship fund. The pain of her father's struggles hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined her. She'd found a way to channel it into something powerful, something hopeful. One crisp autumn evening, as they wrapped up a meeting at the community center, Cole looked at Tasha, his eyes steady. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For giving me a chance to do this right. For teaching me what matters." Tasha met his gaze, her own eyes glistening. "This isn't about you, Cole," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's about them." She nodded toward the students studying at nearby tables, their faces lit with determination. "But you're trying. And that's more than I expected." As Cole walked away, the city lights stretching out before him, he felt the weight of his privilege differently. Not as a burden, but as a responsibility. He knew the journey wasn't over, for him or for Tasha. There were still wounds to heal, systems to dismantle, stories to uncover. But for the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. Tasha lingered at the community center, watching the students work. She thought of her father, of the nights he'd come home exhausted but never broken. She thought of her brother, chasing his dreams. And she thought of Cole, not the man who'd thrown coffee at her, but the one who'd stayed, who'd listened, who'd changed. Her heart was still cautious, but it was open, just enough to let hope Indiana. As she locked up the center and stepped into the cool night air, Tasha smiled, a real, unguarded smile. The world wasn't perfect, and neither were they. But they were moving forward, together, building something that honored the past and promised a better future. And that was enough.